The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient courtyard of the royal palace in Bangkok, Thailand. The golden spires gleamed against the clear blue sky, and the sound of traditional music drifted through the air. It was going to be a special day, one that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. David Rodriguez stepped out of the black sedan that had brought him to the palace gates. He adjusted his crisp white martial arts uniform and took a deep breath. After 15 years of teaching Kung Fu in California, he never imagined he'd be standing here, about to demonstrate his skills to the Thai Royal Guard. The cultural exchange program had been his dream come true, a chance to share his passion for martial arts with one of the most respected military units in Southeast Asia. The palace coordinator, a thin man wearing traditional Thai clothing, greeted David with a respectful bow. His name was Mr. Kanat, and he had been organizing these cultural events for over a decade. He spoke perfect English, which made David feel more at ease in this foreign environment. "Welcome to our palace, Master Rodriguez," Mr. Kanat said with a warm smile. "The guards are very excited to see your demonstration. They have heard many stories about American Kung Fu." David chuckled nervously. "I hope I can live up to their expectations. I've been practicing for this moment for months." As they walked through the ornate corridors, David marveled at the intricate details carved into every wall and ceiling. Golden Buddhas sat peacefully in alcoves, and colorful murals told stories of ancient Thai warriors. The air smelled of incense and fresh jasmine flowers. It felt like stepping into a different world, one where tradition and honor meant everything. The training courtyard was unlike anything David had ever seen. It was surrounded by high walls covered in beautiful paintings of mythical creatures and legendary battles. The ground was made of smooth stone, perfect for martial arts practice. Wooden practice weapons hung neatly on racks along the walls, and there was even a small shrine in one corner where offerings of flowers and fruit had been placed. About 20 royal guards were already assembled, standing in perfect formation. They wore their ceremonial uniforms, dark blue with gold trim and polished brass buttons that caught the sunlight. Each guard stood perfectly still, their faces serious and professional. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These men were chosen from thousands of applicants to protect the Thai royal family. They were the best of the best. David felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. Back home in Los Angeles, he was confident and relaxed when teaching his students. But this was different. These guards had trained in Muay Thai since childhood. They knew combat in ways that most Americans could never understand. What if his techniques looked weak compared to their traditional fighting style? Mr. Kanat clapped, his hands together to get everyone's attention. "Gentlemen, please welcome Master David Rodriguez from California. He has come here to share the ancient art of Chinese Kung Fu with us today." The guards bowed in unison, a sign of respect that made David feel both honored and pressured. He bowed back, trying to remember everything he had learned about Thai culture and customs. "Thank you for having me," David said, his voice carrying across the quiet courtyard. Kung Fu and Muay Thai both come from the same place, the desire to protect ourselves and those we love. Today, I hope we can learn from each other. He began with basic forms, moving through the flowing movements that had taken him years to master. His body moved like water, each motion connecting smoothly to the next. The guards watched intently, their eyes following every step and hand position. David could feel their concentration, and it helped him relax into his routine. For the first 20 minutes, everything went perfectly. David demonstrated blocking techniques, showed how to redirect an opponent's energy, and explained the philosophy behind each movement. The guards asked thoughtful questions, and David could see genuine interest in their eyes. This was exactly what he had hoped for, a real cultural exchange between martial artists who respected each other's traditions. But then Captain Narong stepped forward from the back of the group. Captain Narong was different from the other guards. Where they were respectful and curious, he seemed skeptical and slightly annoyed. He was older, probably in his late 30s, with scars on his knuckles that told stories of real fights. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and his posture showed the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "Master Rodriguez," Captain Narong said, his English careful but clear, What you show us is very beautiful, like a dance. But can it work in real fighting? The question hung in the air like a challenge. David felt all eyes turned to him. This was the moment he had been dreading, when someone would question whether his art was practical or just for show. "That's a fair question, Captain," David replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Kung Fu is both beautiful and effective. The flowing movements you see aren't just for demonstration. They're based on centuries of combat experience." Captain Narong nodded slowly, but David could see doubt in his eyes. "In Thailand, we learn Muay Thai because it works in real situations. Every technique has been tested in the ring and on the battlefield. Can you show us something more unpractical?" The other guards shifted slightly, sensing the tension building between their captain and the visiting instructor. Mr. Cannett looked worried, knowing that this cultural exchange could go wrong if the two men couldn't find common ground. David felt his pride stinging. He had dedicated his life to Kung Fu, had won tournaments, had defended himself in real situations. To have his art dismissed as mere dancing was insulting, but he also knew he was a guest in this palace, representing not just himself but American martial arts in general. "I understand your concern, Captain," David said, choosing his words carefully. "Would you like me to demonstrate some of the more combat-oriented techniques?" Captain Narong's eyes lit up with interest. "Yes. Show us real Kung Fu fighting, not performance Kung Fu." David felt the pressure building in his chest. The other guards moved closer, forming a circle around the two men. Even Mr. Cannett seemed nervous, wringing his hands as he watched the interaction unfold. "I'll need a partner to demonstrate with," David said. "Someone who can help show how these techniques work against real attacks." Without hesitation, Captain Narong stepped into the center of the circle. "I will be your partner." The words sent a chill down David's spine. This wasn't what he had planned. He had hoped one of the younger, less experienced guards might volunteer. But Captain Narong was clearly the most skilled fighter in the group, and he was offering himself as a test of David's abilities. "Are you sure, Captain?" David asked. "Some of these techniques can be quite intense." Captain Narong smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had found his prey. "I have been fighting for 20 years, Master Rodriguez. I think I can handle your Kung Fu." The other guards murmured among themselves in Thai. David couldn't understand the words, but their tone suggested they were excited to see their captain face off against the foreign martial artist. This was no longer a cultural demonstration. It was becoming a test of honor between two fighting systems. David looked around the circle of faces watching him. Some showed curiosity, others showed anticipation. All of them were waiting to see what he would do. He could back down, make an excuse, keep things safe and diplomatic. But if he did that, he would leave Thailand, knowing that he had failed to represent his art with courage and conviction. "All right, Captain," David said, settling into a fighting stance. "Let's show your men what Kung Fu can do." The courtyard fell completely silent, except for the distant sound of birds singing in the palace gardens. Even the wind seemed to stop, blowing as the two martial artists faced each other in the center of the stone circle. David had faced many opponents in his years of training and competition, but never under circumstances like these. This wasn't a tournament with rules and referees. This wasn't his own school where he controlled the environment. This was the royal palace of Thailand, and he was about to spar with one of the country's elite warriors in front of an audience that clearly favored their own champion. Captain Narong moved into his own fighting stance, the traditional Muay Thai position with his fists raised and his body balanced perfectly on the balls of his feet. David could see immediately that this man was no amateur. His positioning was flawless, his breathing controlled, his eyes focused and calculating. "What would you like me to attack with?" Captain Narong asked politely, though David could hear the confidence in his voice. "Let's start with something simple," David replied. "A straight punch to the body." Captain Narong nodded and prepared to throw a controlled punch that would give David the chance to demonstrate his defensive techniques. But as he drew back his fist, David could see something in the captain's eyes that made him nervous. This man wasn't just going to throw a gentle demonstration punch. He was going to test David with real power and speed. The punch came faster than David expected. Captain Narong's fist shot forward like a piston, aimed directly at David's solar plexus with enough force to drop a normal person to their knees. But David wasn't a normal person. He had trained for moments like this his entire adult life. The blood on Captain Narong's lips seemed to glow in the bright morning sunlight. David watched in horror as the Thai officer touched his mouth again, examining the red stain on his white glove with the calm precision of a professional soldier. Around them, the 20 royal guards remained motionless, but David could feel their energy shifting like the air before a thunderstorm. What had started as curious interest was now becoming something much more dangerous. These men had sworn an oath to protect their captain, their country, and their honor, and David had just violated all three with a single punch. "Captain, David began, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Narong held up his hand, silencing him instantly. The gesture was so commanding that David's words died in his throat. The captain rolled his jaw slowly, testing for damage, his dark eyes never leaving David's face. "That was not a demonstration technique," Captain Narong said quietly. His voice was steady, but David could hear the anger building underneath like water behind a dam. "That was a real strike, a fighting strike." David's heart hammered against his ribs. He wanted to explain that it had been an accident, that his training had taken over without his conscious control. But looking at the faces surrounding him, he realized that explanations might only make things worse. Mr. Cannett stepped forward nervously, his hands trembling as he wrung them together. "Captain Narong, I'm sure Master Rodriguez didn't mean to..." "Didn't? Mean to what?" Captain Narong interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "Didn't mean to show us what American Kung Fu really looks like? Didn't mean to demonstrate how Americans treat their hosts?" The accusation hit David like a physical blow. In Thai culture, striking someone in the face wasn't just an attack on their body. It was an assault on their dignity, their reputation, their very soul. And to do it in front of subordinates made it infinitely worse. "Captain Narong," David said, fighting to keep his voice calm and respectful. "Please believe me when I say this was not intentional. In my training, when someone creates an opening, we're taught to respond automatically. It's a reflex that..." "A reflex?" Captain Narong's voice cracked like a whip. "You call dishonoring a Thai officer in his own palace a reflex?" The other guards began to murmur among themselves in rapid Thai. David couldn't understand the words, but their tone made his skin crawl. He caught glimpses of angry expressions and hostile gestures. The respectful curiosity they had shown earlier was evaporating like morning mist. One of the younger guards, a man who couldn't have been more than 25, stepped closer to the circle. His hand rested on the ceremonial sword at his side, not threateningly, but meaningfully. David realized that these weren't just martial artists or soldiers. They were palace guards, and he had just committed what could be considered an act of aggression within the royal compound. "Perhaps we should end the demonstration here," Mr. Cannett suggested desperately. "Master Rodriguez can offer a formal apology, and we can..." "No," Captain Narong said firmly. "This American wants to show us real kung fu fighting. Let him finish what he started." David felt ice forming in his stomach. The captain's words weren't a request or an invitation. They were a challenge, one that David couldn't refuse without, completely humiliating himself and dishonoring every American martial artist who might follow in his footsteps. "Captain, I respect your skills and your position," David said carefully, "but I think there's been a misunderstanding here. What happened, Captain Narong interrupted, "is that you hit me in the face during what was supposed to be a peaceful demonstration. In my country, when someone strikes you, you have the right to strike back. It's a matter of honor." The circle of guards grew tighter around them. David could smell their cologne mixed with leather and metal polish from their uniforms. He could see the intensity in their eyes, the way they watched every movement he made. These men had probably never seen their captain challenged by an outsider, especially not by someone from a completely different fighting tradition. "I understand your anger," David said, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "And I take full responsibility for what happened. But continuing this demonstration might not be..." "Might not be what?" Captain Narong asked, stepping closer. might not be safe for you, might not end well for the American kung fu master? David realized that he had walked into a trap of his own making. By striking the captain, even accidentally, he had created a situation where backing down would be seen as cowardice, but continuing could lead to serious injury, either his own or the captain's, and potentially create an international incident. The morning sun had climbed higher, and sweat began to form on David's forehead despite the relatively cool temperature. He could hear the distant sounds of palace life continuing around them, gardeners working, tourists being guided through other sections, birds singing in the ancient trees. But in this courtyard, time seemed frozen in a moment of dangerous possibility. "Captain Narong," David said, trying one more time to de-escalate the situation, "I came here to build bridges between our fighting traditions, not to create conflict. If I've offended you or dishonored you in any way, I sincerely apologize. But I don't think—" "You don't think what?" Captain Narong demanded. "You don't think you should face the consequences of your actions? You don't think a Thai officer deserves the same respect you would show an American?" The questions stung because they contained just enough truth to be painful. David had let his pride and his reflexes override his diplomacy. He had treated this demonstration like a competition instead of a cultural exchange. And now he was facing the consequences of that mistake. Around them, more guards had begun to gather. Word was spreading through the palace that something unusual was happening in the training courtyard. David could see faces appearing at windows and doorways, palace staff and officials drawn by the tension that seemed to radiate outward like heat from a fire. "I think," David said slowly, "that we're both honorable martial artists who got caught up in the moment. I think we can find a way to resolve this that respects both of our traditions." Captain Narong laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You want to resolve this with words? In Thailand, we resolve conflicts between warriors with action. You showed me your kung fu accidentally. Now show me on purpose." The challenge was now completely explicit. David could see in the captain's eyes that there was no diplomatic solution available. The man's honor had been injured in front of his subordinates, and the only way to restore it was through combat. In Thai culture, backing down from such a challenge would be seen as admitting weakness and guilt. But David also knew that accepting the challenge was incredibly dangerous. Captain Narong was clearly a skilled fighter with years of Muay Thai training. He was fighting on his home ground, in front of his own people, with nothing to lose and everything to gain. If David lost, it would be embarrassing but survivable. If David won, it could be seen as a foreign aggressor defeating a Thai officer in the royal palace. "Captain," David said, making one final attempt at reason, "I don't want to fight you, not because I'm afraid, but because I respect you and your position. There has to be another way to handle this." Captain Narong's expression hardened. "There is no other way. You struck me. Now I will strike you. That is justice." The guards around them began to spread out, giving the two men more room. Someone must have sent word to higher authorities, because David could see more officials hurrying toward the courtyard. This was quickly becoming much bigger than a simple misunderstanding between two martial artists. David looked around the circle of faces watching him. Some showed curiosity, others showed anticipation. A few seemed concerned about what was about to happen, but all of them were waiting to see what the American would do when faced with a direct challenge from their captain. He thought about his students back home in California, young people who looked up to him as an example of what kung fu could teach them about discipline, respect, and self-control. He thought about the other American martial artists who might be invited to similar cultural exchanges in the future. His actions in the next few minutes could affect how Americans were perceived by the Thai martial arts community for years to come. But he also thought about his own honor as a fighter. He had dedicated his life to the study of combat arts. He had claimed to be a master, had accepted the responsibility that came with that title. If he backed down now, he would be admitting that his training was inadequate, that his skills were just for show. "If this is what you truly want, Captain," David said finally, his voice growing stronger as he made his decision, "then I accept your challenge. But I want everyone here to understand that what happens next is not a demonstration. It's a real fight between two martial artists who respect each other's traditions. Captain Narong nodded approvingly. Finally, the American shows some honor. David felt his body shifting automatically into a fighting stance. All the uncertainty and diplomatic concerns faded away as his training took over. This was what he had prepared for his entire adult life. The moment when all the forms and techniques and philosophy would be tested against a skilled opponent who wanted to defeat him. The taste of blood filled David's mouth as he circled away from Captain Narong's relentless advance. The uppercut had caught him cleanly, splitting his lip and rattling his brain enough to make the ancient courtyard spin slightly around him. But worse than the physical pain was the sound echoing in his ears. The cheers and applause from the Royal Guard celebrating their captain's first successful strike. David spat blood onto the stone floor and tried to regain his focus. This was no longer about cultural exchange or diplomatic relations. This was about survival. Captain Narong was fighting like a man whose reputation depended on victory, and David was beginning to understand just how dangerous that made him. The Thai officer moved forward again, his fists cutting through the air with mechanical precision. Each punch was thrown with bad intentions, designed not just to win points in a sparring match, but to end the fight decisively. David could see 20 years of combat experience in every movement, the way Narong shifted his weight, the timing of his combinations, the relentless pressure he maintained even when David tried to create distance. "Is this your kung fu defense?" Captain Narong taunted as he threw another series of punches. "Where are your flowing movements now, American?" The words stung because they contained a grain of truth. David's beautiful forms and demonstrations meant nothing when faced with an opponent who was trying to knock his head off. All the philosophy and tradition in the world wouldn't help him if he couldn't handle the raw aggression of a skilled Muay Thai fighter. David blocked a straight right hand, but couldn't avoid the left hook that followed it. The punch crashed into his ribs with the force of a baseball bat, driving the air from his lungs and sending him stumbling sideways. The guards cheered again, their voices echoing off the palace walls like thunder. "David!" Mr. Cannett called out from the edge of the circle, his voice high with panic. "Perhaps you should stay out of this," Captain Narong barked without taking his eyes off his opponent. The American accepted the challenge. Now he must face the consequences like a man. David straightened up slowly, his ribs screaming in protest. He had been in plenty of fights before, both in tournaments and in real-world situations, but nothing had prepared him for this level of intensity. Captain Narong wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to prove a point about the superiority of Thai martial arts, and he was willing to do serious damage to make that point. The circle of watching guards had grown even larger. Palace officials and staff members had joined the crowd, drawn by the sounds of combat and the excited shouting. David could see faces pressed against windows and doorways throughout the courtyard complex. Word was spreading through the royal palace that the American martial arts instructor was getting beaten up by one of their own guards. "Come on, American," one of the younger guards shouted in English. "Show us more of your dancing." The laughter that followed was like acid in David's ears. These men had initially shown him respect, had been genuinely interested in learning about his art. Now they were treating him like entertainment, like a joke that had gone on too long. Captain Narong advanced again, but this time David was ready for him. Instead of trying to flow around the attacks like water, he met them head-on with brutal directness. When the captain threw a jab, David didn't deflect it. He smashed it aside with a bone-crushing block that sent shock waves up both their arms. When Narong followed with a cross, David ducked under it and drove his own fist into the Thai officer's solar plexus. For the first time in the fight, Captain Narong was the one who stumbled backward. His face showed surprise and pain as he fought to regain his breath. The crowd of guards fell silent, shocked to see their invincible captain hurt by the foreign fighter they had been mocking moments before. David pressed his advantage, unleashing a combination of strikes that showcased the deadly effectiveness of kung fu when applied with serious intent. His hands moved like pistons, targeting nerve points and vital areas with surgical precision. But even as he landed clean hits, he could see that Captain Narong was absorbing the punishment and preparing to counterattack. The Thai officer's response was swift and devastating. He caught David's next punch with a perfectly timed block, then drove his knee upward toward David's ribs with crushing force. David barely managed to get his elbow down in time to absorb the impact, but the collision sent numbing pain shooting through his entire arm. Before David could recover, Captain Narong grabbed him by the shoulders and pulled him forward into a clinch position. This was where Muay Thai became truly dangerous, the close-range combat where knees and elbows could cause maximum damage. David found himself trapped against the Thai officer's powerful frame, unable to use his longer-range kung fu techniques effectively. Narong's first knee strike missed by inches, but the second one caught David in the stomach and doubled him over, in agony. The crowd of guards erupted in cheers again, sensing that their captain was about to finish off the American challenger. David gasped for air and tried to break free from the clinch, but Narong's grip was like iron. "Had enough, Kung Fu Master," Captain Narong whispered in David's ear. "Ready to admit that American martial arts are just for show?" The words ignited something primal in David's chest. He might be losing this fight. He might be humiliated in front of dozens of witnesses, but he wasn't going to give his opponent the satisfaction of hearing him surrender. Instead of trying to escape the clinch, David suddenly drove his weight forward, using his momentum to send both fighters crashing toward the ground. They hit the stone floor hard, with David landing on top. For a moment, the kung fu practitioner had the advantage of position and leverage, but Captain Narong was too experienced to stay on his back for long. He rolled and twisted with the fluid grace of a snake, reversing their positions and ending, up-mounted on David's chest with his fists cocked and ready to rain down punishment. "This is where it ends, American," Captain Narong said, breathing heavily but still in complete control. David looked up at his opponent and saw something that chilled him to the bone. The Thai officer's eyes held no mercy, no restraint, no concern for David's safety. This had started as a demonstration, had escalated into a challenge, and was now becoming something much more serious. Captain Narong was prepared to do whatever it took to defend his honor and prove the superiority of his fighting system. The first punch came down like a hammer, aimed directly at David's face. He managed to turn his head just enough that the blow landed on his cheek instead of his nose, but the impact still sent stars shooting across his vision. The second punch was coming before he could fully recover from the first. David caught the captain's wrist with both hands, stopping the strike just inches from his face. For a moment, the two fighters were locked in a test of pure strength, their muscles straining against each other as they fought for control. David could feel Captain Narong's power, could see the determination in his eyes, could hear the crowd of guards shouting encouragement to their champion. But David had been training, for 15 years too, and in that moment of desperate struggle, all his knowledge and experience crystallized into a single, perfect technique. He released Narong's wrist suddenly, while simultaneously bucking his hips upward, using the captain's own forward momentum to send him flying over David's head. Captain Narong hit the stone floor hard, rolling several times before coming to rest near the edge of the circle. For a moment, he lay still, stunned by the unexpected reversal. David scrambled to his feet, blood running from his split lip and his cheek already beginning to swell from the punches he had absorbed. The courtyard fell completely silent. Even the distant sounds of palace life seemed to fade away as everyone watched the two battered fighters slowly getting back to their feet. Both men were breathing heavily, both were showing signs of damage from the brutal exchange, and both were clearly prepared to continue fighting until one of them couldn't get up anymore. Mr. Cannett stepped forward nervously, his hands shaking as he tried to find words that might end this catastrophe before it got any worse. "Gentlemen, please," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "This has gone far enough. Someone is going to get seriously hurt." Captain Narong wiped blood from his own mouth now. David's last combination had opened a cut on his lip that matched the one he had given the American. Instead of being angry about the injury, the Thai officer seemed almost pleased. "The American has some fight in him after all," Narong said, speaking to his men but keeping his eyes locked on David. "Perhaps Kung Fu is not just dancing." David felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the captain's respect for his fighting ability would be enough to end this confrontation with both their honors intact. Maybe they could find a way to finish this as martial artists rather than enemies. But that hope died when he saw the look in Captain Narong's eyes. The Thai officer wasn't ready to call this fight a draw. If anything, David's show of skill had only made him more determined to prove that Muay Thai was the superior art. The taste of his own blood seemed to have awakened something savage in the normally disciplined soldier. But Kung Fu will still lose to Muay Thai. Captain Narong continued, settling back into his fighting stance. And the American will learn proper respect for Thai warriors. Captain Narong's fist cut through the morning air like a cannonball, aimed directly at David's already swollen face. The Thai officer had put everything behind this punch. All his strength, all his anger, all his determination to end this fight, decisively, and restore his honor in front of his men. It was the kind of strike that could break bones, knock teeth loose, or even cause serious brain damage if it landed cleanly. But it never made contact. David's response was something that would be talked about in the royal palace for decades to come. Instead of trying to block or dodge the devastating punch, he did something that defied every instinct of self-preservation. He stepped directly into Captain Narong's attack, moving forward and to the side with a timing so precise that it seemed impossible. The captain's fist whistled past David's ear, missing by less than an inch. But David wasn't just avoiding the strike. He was using Narong's own momentum against him. As the Thai officer's body followed through with his punch, David's hands moved with lightning speed, one deflecting Narong's extended arm while the other drove forward in what appeared to be a killing blow aimed at the captain's throat. Time seemed to freeze as everyone in the courtyard watched the Americans' counterattack unfold. The royal guards who had been cheering for their captain suddenly fell silent, realizing they were about to witness their commander being seriously injured or possibly killed by the foreign martial artist. Mr. Cannett gasped in horror, knowing that if David struck Captain Narong in the throat with full force, it could create an international incident that would end both their careers and potentially damage relations between Thailand and the United States. But then something extraordinary happened. David's strike stopped exactly 1 millimeter from Captain Narong's throat. The American's fist hung in the air like a frozen sculpture, close enough that the Thai officer could feel the knuckles brushing against his skin, but held back by a level of control that bordered on the supernatural. For 3 full seconds, the two fighters remained locked in that position. David with his deadly strike perfectly positioned but restrained, Narong with his eyes wide in shock as he realized how completely he had been outmaneuvered. When David finally lowered his hand and stepped back, Captain Narong remained motionless for several more seconds, his hand instinctively rising to touch his throat where the strike would have landed. The Thai officer's face showed a mixture of emotions that was almost impossible to read: surprise, respect, confusion, and something that might have been gratitude. The courtyard remained deadly silent. The guards who had been so vocal in their support for their captain now stood speechless, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The palace officials who had come to watch the spectacle looked equally stunned. Even the birds in the ancient trees seemed to have stopped singing. Finally, Captain Narong found his voice. "How?" he asked quietly, his eyes still locked on David's face. "How did you know exactly where I was going to strike? How did you move? Into my attack instead of away from it? How did you stop your counterstrike with such precision?" David was breathing heavily, adrenaline still coursing through his system from the near-death experience they had just shared. But despite the physical and emotional intensity of the moment, he managed to keep his voice steady and respectful. "Kegun, Kung Fu, we call it listening," David explained. "Not listening with your ears, but listening with your whole body. When you committed to that final strike, your entire body telegraphed your intention, your weight shift, the tension in your shoulders, the angle of your hips. Everything told me exactly where you were going to attack and when." Captain Narong shook his head slowly, still struggling to understand what had happened. "But you moved toward my punch instead of away from it. That goes against every fighting instinct. Sometimes the safest place is in the heart of danger," David replied. "By moving into your strike zone, I could control the distance and timing. Your punch was designed to hit a target that would be moving away from you, not toward you." The Thai officer touched his throat again, his fingertips exploring the spot where David's knuckles had stopped just short of crushing his windpipe. And the control to stop your strike at the exact moment of contact? 15 years of training, David said simply. 15 years of learning that true martial arts isn't about how hard you can hit, but about how precisely you can control that power. A murmur ran through the crowd of watching guards as they began to understand the implications of what they had seen. Their captain, a man who had never lost a fight in his 20-year career, a former Muay Thai champion who was considered one of the most dangerous hand-to-hand combatants in Thailand, had been completely at the mercy of the American Kung Fu instructor for those crucial seconds. But instead of capitalizing on his advantage, instead of delivering the finishing blow that would have ended the fight and humiliated Captain Narong in front of his own men, David had chosen restraint. He had shown mercy when he could have shown dominance. One of the younger guards stepped forward, his voice filled with awe. "You could have killed the captain." "Yes," David admitted without pride or boasting. But that was never the point of this demonstration. Captain Narong stared at David for a long moment, his expression cycling through a range of emotions. The yabe, anger and wounded pride that had driven him to challenge the American, were gradually being replaced by something else. Professional respect for a fellow martial artist who had just taught him a lesson in humility. "In 20 years of fighting," Captain Narong said slowly, "no one has ever done what you just did to me. No one has ever made me feel so completely helpless." "Captain," David said, bowing respectfully, "you're an incredible fighter. Your technique, your power, your spirit, all are outstanding. What happened just now wasn't about one art being superior to another. It was about timing and opportunity. On another day and another moment, the outcome might have been completely different." The Thai officer considered these words carefully. Around them, the crowd of spectators began to relax slightly as it became clear that the violence was over, and both fighters were going to survive the encounter intact. "You're being modest, Master Rodriguez," Captain Narong said. "What you demonstrated wasn't just timing and opportunity, it was mastery, true martial arts mastery." Mr. Cannett stepped forward cautiously, still not entirely sure that the crisis had passed. "Perhaps now would be a good time to—" "No," Captain Narong interrupted, but his voice was no longer harsh or commanding. "I want to understand what just happened here. Master Rodriguez, would you be willing to show me that technique again? Slowly this time so I can see exactly how you did it?" David looked around the circle of faces watching him. The hostility and skepticism that had been there minutes before was gone, replaced by genuine curiosity and respect. These royal guards had just witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about martial arts, and they wanted to learn from it. "Of course, Captain," David said, "but first I owe you an apology. When this demonstration began, I let my pride get in the way of my judgment. The strike that started all of this was inexcusable. I came here to build bridges between our fighting traditions, not to show off or prove anything." Captain Narong waved off the apology with a gesture that suggested the matter was already forgotten. "Master Rodriguez, in my culture, we believe that sometimes the gods put two warriors in the same place at the same time for a reason. Perhaps what happened here today was meant to teach us both something important." "What do you think it was meant to teach us?" David asked. The Thai officer smiled for the first time since the demonstration had begun. It was a genuine smile, free of the anger and wounded pride that had driven him to challenge the American. "That there is always more to learn," Captain Narong said. "That no matter how skilled we think we are, there is always someone who can show us something new. That true martial arts isn't about proving superiority. It's about pushing each other to be better." The guards around them began to nod in agreement. Several of them were already discussing what they had witnessed in Rapid Thai, their voices excited and respectful rather than mocking or dismissive. "Captain," David said, "would you be willing to show me some of your Muay Thai techniques? I have to admit, I've never faced anyone with your level of skill in that art. I think I could learn a lot from you." Captain Narong's smile grew broader. "It would be my honor, Master Rodriguez. And perhaps you could teach me more about that listening technique you mentioned. I've been fighting for 20 years and I've never encountered anything like it. As the two fighters began to demonstrate techniques for each other, the atmosphere in the courtyard transformed completely. What had begun as a cultural exchange, escalated into a dangerous fight and nearly ended in disaster, was now becoming exactly what David had originally hoped for, a genuine sharing of knowledge between martial artists from different traditions. The royal guards gathered closer, no longer spectators to a conflict but students eager to learn from both instructors. Mr. Cannett visibly relaxed as he realized that his cultural exchange program was not only salvaged, but had actually exceeded his wildest expectations. But the most remarkable transformation was in Captain Narang himself. The golden afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as David and Captain Narang continued their exchange of martial arts knowledge. What had started as a near disaster had transformed into something beautiful. Two master fighters, sharing their deepest understanding of combat arts with mutual respect and genuine curiosity. "Show me again how you read my body language," Captain Narang requested, settling into his fighting stance. "This time, I want to understand what signals I was giving you." David nodded and positioned himself across from the Thai officer. Over the past 2 hours, they had repeated this exercise dozens of times, with David explaining each subtle cue that had telegraphed Narang's intentions during their brief but intense fight. "Watch your left shoulder," David said, pointing to the spot in question. "When you're preparing for a power punch with your right hand, you unconsciously drop your left shoulder about half an inch to create a better platform for rotation. It happens about 1 second before you actually throw the punch." Captain Narang threw a slow-motion right hand, paying careful attention to his own body mechanics. "I can feel it now," he said with amazement. "I never realized I was doing that." "Most fighters have tells like that," David explained. "In tournaments, good coaches will study video footage of opponents to identify their patterns. But in real combat, you have to learn to read them instantly while you're in the middle of fighting." The royal guards gathered around them had become increasingly absorbed in these technical discussions. What had begun as entertainment, watching their captain fight a foreign challenger, had evolved into an educational experience that none of them would ever forget. Several of the younger guards were taking notes, writing down the principles that David and Captain Narang were sharing. "Master Rodriguez," one of the guards called out, "could you show us that defensive technique you used? The one where you move toward the attack instead of away from it?" David looked to Captain Narang for permission. Even though the tension between them had dissolved, this was still the captain's training session with his own men. Narang nodded encouragingly. "Lieutenant, shall I come here?" Narang commanded. "You can be Master Rodriguez's demonstration partner." A young guard with eager eyes stepped forward and bowed to both instructors. David could see that Lieutenant Chai was probably in his mid-20s, with the lean build and confident posture of someone who had been training in Muay Thai since childhood. "Lieutenant," David said, "I want you to throw a strong punch at my face. Don't hold back. Throw it like you really want to hit me." Lieutenant Chai glanced at his captain uncertainly. "Sir, are you sure this is safe?" Captain Narang laughed. "Lieutenant, I just spent an hour trying to hit Master Rodriguez with everything I had. Trust me, he can handle whatever you throw at him." The young guard settled into his stance and prepared to strike. David could see the nervous excitement in his eyes. This was probably the first time he had ever been asked to attack a visiting instructor in front of the entire unit. "Remember," David called out to the watching guards, "this technique isn't about being brave or reckless. It's about understanding distance, timing, and angles. Watch carefully." Lieutenant Chai's punch came fast and straight, exactly as David had expected. But instead of the brutal power that Captain Narang had brought to his attacks, this strike was thrown with the controlled intensity of a training exercise. David stepped into the punch at the last possible moment, deflected it with minimal contact, and placed his hand gently against the lieutenant's throat to show where his counter-strike would have landed. The guards erupted in applause and excited chatter. Several of them immediately began practicing the movement with each other, trying to replicate what they had just seen. "The key," David explained as the guards practiced, "is not to commit to the forward movement until you're absolutely certain of your timing. If you step in too early or too late, you'll walk right into the punch instead of avoiding it. Captain Narong watched his men attempting the technique with the pride of a teacher seeing his students learn something new. Master Rodriguez, would you be willing to teach this technique to my entire unit? Not just these men, but all of the palace guards? David felt a warm surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what he had hoped to accomplish when he first accepted the invitation to visit Thailand. Captain, it would be my honor, but only if you're willing to teach me more about Muay Thai strategy and tactics. I've learned more in the past few hours than I did in years of studying videos and books. Agreed, Captain Narong said immediately. In fact, I have a proposal for you. The palace guard trains every morning at dawn. If you're willing to get up early, you could join us for the rest of your stay in Thailand. We could learn from each other every day. The offer was more than David had dared to hope for. Training with the Thai Royal Guard would be an incredible opportunity to deepen his understanding of martial arts and build relationships that could last a lifetime. Captain, I accept your proposal gratefully, David said. But I have one condition. Captain Narong raised an eyebrow. What condition? Next time we start with controlled techniques and work our way up gradually, David said with a grin. I'm not sure my body can handle another fight like the one we just had. Captain Narong threw back his head and laughed, a rich, genuine sound that echoed off the palace walls. Agreed, Master Rodriguez. I think we've both proven whatever we needed to prove today. As the afternoon wore on, more palace officials arrived to watch the training session. Word had spread throughout the complex that something remarkable was happening in the main courtyard. The American martial arts instructor and the captain of the Royal Guard were working together like old friends, sharing techniques and philosophy with an enthusiasm that was infectious. Mr. Knit approached David during a brief break, his face glowing with relief and satisfaction. Master Rodriguez, I have to admit, when I saw you strike Captain Narong, I thought this entire exchange program was doomed. I was already composing apology letters to both governments in my head. David winced at the memory of that initial mistake. Mr. Knit, I still can't believe I let my reflexes take over like that. In 15 years of teaching, I've never had such a lapse in judgment. But perhaps it was necessary, Mr. Knit suggested. If you had simply given a polite demonstration and left, both you and Captain Narong would have remained locked in your assumptions about each other's fighting styles. Sometimes it takes a crisis to break through to real understanding. David considered this perspective as he watched Captain Narong working with his guards, incorporating elements of Kung Fu philosophy into traditional Muay Thai techniques. The Thai officer was explaining to his men how the concept of listening could improve their defensive awareness, while simultaneously demonstrating how Muay Thai's aggressive forward pressure could be used to counter Kung Fu's flowing movements. Mr. Knit, David said, do you think it would be possible to extend my stay in Thailand? I was originally scheduled to be here for 1 week, but I think both Captain Narong and I would benefit from more time to explore these ideas. Mr. Knit's face lit up. Master Rodriguez, I think that can be arranged. In fact, after what I've witnessed today, I believe the Ministry of Culture would be very interested in expanding this exchange program. Perhaps we could arrange for Captain Narong to visit the United States as well, to teach Muay Thai to American martial artists. The idea sent a thrill of excitement through David. The thought of bringing Captain Narong to his school in California, of introducing his students to authentic Thai boxing taught by a genuine master, was almost too good to imagine. As the training session continued, David found himself reflecting on how dramatically the day had changed. He had arrived at the palace that morning full of confidence and excitement, ready to showcase his Kung Fu skills to an appreciative foreign audience. Instead, he had nearly created an international incident, had been forced into a real fight with a skilled opponent, and had come dangerously close to seriously injuring a Thai military officer. But somehow, through a combination of skill, luck, and mutual respect, the crisis had transformed into an opportunity. Instead of returning to America with his tail between his legs, he would be going home with new knowledge, new relationships, and new possibilities for cultural exchange. Master Rodriguez, Captain Narong called out, interrupting his thoughts. My men have a question about the breathing techniques you mentioned earlier. Could you demonstrate how breath control affects power generation in Kung Fu? David smiled and walked back to the center of the circle, where 20 eager faces waited to learn from him. As he began to explain the relationship between breathing and internal energy, he caught sight of the palace walls rising around them, golden in the late afternoon sunlight. This ancient courtyard had probably witnessed thousands of training sessions over the centuries. Thai warriors had practiced their arts here for generations, preparing to defend their king and country against all threats. And now, for a brief moment in history, it was also witnessing something new, the meeting of Eastern and Western martial arts traditions, brought together by conflict but united by mutual respect. The breath is the bridge between mind and body, David explained to the